What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Brettel. Today we're going to discuss the Packers' first Week 15 injury report ahead of their matchup with the Seattle Seahawks, because there's a lot to parse through on what came out on Wednesday in terms of the practice status of several players, so we're going to dive into that. But first, you know what to do. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. You can find all my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com, including article versions of what we're going to discuss here today. And for my Wisconsin sports radio fans, download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app, Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, Sports Radio. Find me on Sports Lead multiple days per week, 3 to 6. And like I said, we're going to talk about the Packers injury report here today. So let's start with the secondary. Javon Bullard did not participate in Wednesday's practice. On Monday, Matt LaFleur said that he's considered week to week right now. Bullard would exit the Lions game in the second half with an ankle injury. And again, obviously the caveat to all of this, everything we're discussed today, is that things can change as the next couple days of practices take place. But with Bullard being week to week, not practicing on Wednesday, his status for the game definitely seems very, very, very much up in the air at this point. But again, we'll see how all that unfolds. Evan Williams did participate. He was a limited participant. However, he's still in concussion protocol as of Wednesday. And then Jaire Alexander was a full participant in Wednesday's practice. That's the first time that he's been a full participant since re-injuring his knee. I think it was in the Chicago game coming out of the bye week. So good news in that regard. Matt LaFleur said they'll see how he responds. I think Thursday's practice, in terms of what capacity he's practicing in, is going to be a really good indicator of whether he could play or not on Sunday. Because again, it was his first time being a full participant in a number of weeks, and if he responds well to the workload that he put on his knee during Wednesday and is a full participant again on Thursday, again, caveat as always, things can change. But I would say that that's at least a good sign about his potential availability for Sunday. Now, the cornerback room, the secondary, with or without Jaire this week, is going to face a tough matchup against that Seahawks passing game. And going back to even before the draft, the Packers have continually expressed their confidence in that position group. Gutekunst did it before the draft. Matt LaFleur and company did it throughout training camp, throughout the preseason. A month ago, when Brian Gutekunst spoke to us during the bye week, he again echoed those sentiments and the confidence that they have in that position group. And on paper, coming into the season, it sounds good, right? You have another year of Keyshawn Nixon having experience. You have Jaire Alexander, of course. Eric Stokes, healthy. Carrington Valentine, hopefully making that year 2 jump. Like, you can see where that confidence stemmed from, right? You can see the pieces of the puzzle being there for this Packers cornerback room, but hasn't necessarily played out that way. Unfortunately, again, Jaire Alexander's battled injuries this season, which he has in previous years. Eric Stokes just doesn't look like his old self that we saw from his rookie season, even though he is healthy this year. And Carrington Valentine hasn't made that year 2 leap that everyone was hoping to see from him. I know it's one of those instances where everyone's wondering why are Eric Stokes and Carrington Valentine still rotating snaps out on the boundary? Why isn't Carrington Valentine getting more playing time? There's something that the Packers coaching staff, I don't know what it is, but there's something that the Packers coaching staff is seeing on the film, in the games, behind the scenes on the practice field, to where they still feel that Eric Stokes is deserving of those opportunities. If Carrington Valentine had stepped in and just absolutely secured that playing time away from Eric Stokes, he would be the one out there. So there's just that jump, and maybe it's the transition to the new defense under Jeff Hafley, whatever it may be, that jump from Valentine just hasn't been there. And without Alexander on the field, because obviously this cornerback room, we'll touch on this here in a second, looks very, very different when he's a part of it, right? Like when Jaire is out there, I mean, this cornerback room obviously looks a lot different and it performs much better. And I know, not groundbreaking information there, but it's not as if even without Jaire, but it's not as if the big chunk passing plays are a massive issue for that group this season. On the year, the Packers ranked 17th in yards per pass attempt allowed. And like I said, think back to the previous games throughout the season. There aren't a ton of plays, relatively speaking. Of course, they still happen. But relatively speaking, there aren't a ton of plays where you see the Packers cornerbacks getting, burned 25, 30 yards down the field. The issue, however, is the lack of ball production and the high completion percentage. And let's start with Keyshawn Nixon, who I think has performed pretty well on the boundary. I think he's provided the Packers with a solid presence on the outside. He's giving up just 9.6 yards per catch this season. Like, for an outside cornerback, that is a really, really good number. However, you don't want Keyshawn Nixon to be your number one cornerback, and that's what he's had to be with Jaire Alexander's sideline. There's just more, there's more in those instances that leaves him more exposed versus when Jaire's out on the field, right? And the coaches speak incredibly highly of Keyshawn Nixon and his growth. Jeff Hafley talked about his willingness as a run defender, how he's improved in man coverage. Matt LaFleur the other day discussed his just how he's improved every single year that he's been with the Packers, the importance of his versatility on this defense, on special teams. Nixon has provided a very steady presence for this Packers cornerback room. But again, the potential ups and downs that comes with relying on Keyshawn Nixon heavily, that gets magnified when, again, Jaire Alexander isn't on the field. Now, in a vacuum, like I said, 9.6 yards per catch allowed, very, very good for a boundary cornerback. However, Nixon's allowing a completion rate of 67% this season. Eric Stokes, he's only given up 10.8 yards per catch. Again, pretty solid. But he's given up a completion percentage of 65%. Carrington Valentine, there's only been 2 games this season where he's given up more than 12.5 yards per catch. You can live with 12.5 yards per catch from your boundary cornerback. That's not going to destroy or decimate your defense by any means. However, you know where I'm going with this, his completion rate, 70% is what he's surrendering this season. The Packers defense has 12 interceptions as a unit. 7 of those belong to Xavier McKinney. The Packers ranked 29th in pass deflections this season. So like I said, it's great that they're not giving up the big plays. Again, 9, 10, 11 yards per catch from your boundary cornerbacks. That's pretty solid. And again, that's not going to burn you, right? But when Jaire's not out there and you have multiple cornerbacks giving up a catch, 3 out of every 4 throws in their direction, even at only 9 or 10 yards a pop that they're surrendering, that's a first down, right? That moves the chains for the opposing for the opposing offense, that keeps drives going, that puts them in scoring position, that gives them scoring opportunities. It's, again, not giving up the big plays, but it's you don't have that one without Jaire real shutdown option. And so it puts more of a stressor on everyone else on the back end. And again, 9, 10 yards of pop completions over and over and over again are going to lead to first downs, move the chains, control time of possession, and ultimately put up points. And when you don't, and we all know the caliber of player Jaire Alexander is, right? I think this season he's given up a completion percentage of just 56%. His passer rating by opposing quarterbacks when they throw it in his direction is just 79.9. But when he's on the field, there's a positive trickle-down effect that the rest of that secondary feels because of the caliber of player that he is. When Jaire's on the field, that's one side of the field now that you don't necessarily have to worry about as much if you're Jeff Hafley, right? You know Jaire is going to take care of his business on that side. Now that provides you with more flexibility if you're Jeff Hafley in terms of what you do at the safety position. Maybe giving Keyshawn Nixon a little bit more help over the top in certain instances. And again, when you have the way Keyshawn's playing, him limiting the yards through the air, and you provide some additional help over the top, again, that's gonna magnify and help amplify, I should say, his level of play. And that's just by having Jaire Alexander on the field and knowing that quarterbacks are going to target Jaire less than the other cornerbacks. Again, that shrinks the field in terms of areas that the Packers defensively now have to defend. If you know it's less likely to go to the side that Jaire's on, well, that's less, again, defenders you maybe have to devote over there. You also have the trust in Jaire to handle those one-on-one matchups. So now you can put defenders elsewhere on the field. You can muddy things up over the middle. You can provide help for Keyshawn Nixon on the boundary. Again, there's just a massive trickle-down effect that Jaire Alexander's presence provides to this defense, how they go about game planning, and just the overall operation within the secondary. Now, again, looking ahead to Sunday's matchup, we still don't know Javon Bullard's status, but if he doesn't go, I would assume Keyshawn Nixon is going to play in the slot. If Jaire is available, he'll be on the boundary, and then I would guess we would continue to see a rotation of Eric Stokes and Carrington Valentine on that side opposite of Jaire Alexander. And if Jaire Alexander can't go, again, we don't know that for certain yet, then it would be Stokes and Valentine operating the two boundary spots. But across from the Packers, awaiting Green Bay's secondary this week is a Seattle passing game that features some very, very productive receivers. JSN out of the slot. I think he has the 5th most receiving yards in football this season. DK Metcalf has the most targets, downfield targets this season on passes of 20 or more yards. You have Tyler Lockett as their 3rd option. I think he's over the 500-yard mark this season. In receiving yards, Geno Smith at quarterback. So with or without Alexander, this Seattle offense, this Seattle passing game is going to provide a big test for the Packers defense, the Packers secondary. But obviously getting Jaire back would be a massive boost. And then again, Evan Williams still in concussion protocol. If he can't go and they don't have Javon Bullard, would guess that we see Zane Anderson on the back end again. And a best friend, and this just isn't this week, this is on a weekly basis, but perhaps even more so this week given the opponent. The best friend for the Packers secondary, their cornerbacks this week, can be their pass rush. Getting after Geno Smith, not giving him time in the pocket. By ESPN's pass rush win rate metric, Packers rank 26 in that category. The Seattle Seahawks offensive line ranks 22nd in pass block win rate. So one of those units is going to win this matchup on Sunday. And if the Packers can get pressure, we all know that can lead to sacks. Obviously a good thing. Put the offense in long down and distances, predictable passing situations. Pressure disrupts the timing. The rhythm of the play can lead to mistakes. And it means less time in coverage for your cornerbacks versus the flip side, where there's time in the pocket. The play can unfold. The quarterback can throw within, again, the timing and the rhythm of the play. That's additional time that your cornerbacks now have to be in coverage. So the pass rush, getting after the quarterback is going to be a really important element. And again, not groundbreaking news right there. But especially given this matchup, the injury unknowns that the Packers have in the secondary, Packers pass rush has to help out the secondary in this game. Now let's switch to the offensive side of the ball, where tight end Luke Musgrave was back on the practice field and has been designated to return from injured reserve. He was placed on injured reserve after the Packers' Week 5 matchup against the Los Angeles Rams and suffered the ankle injury, he said, very early on against in the Minnesota game early on in Week 4, and he ended up playing that entire game. I think he played 25-30 snaps, had 3 receptions in that game, and then the following week, I can't remember specifically, but I don't believe he practiced or was very, very limited, and he did. And I know Matt LaFleur said leading up to that Rams game or afterwards that they were shocked that Musgrave was even available for that Rams game in Week 5. And he was a reserve in that game. And Musgrave, I mentioned this again, he didn't play any offensive snaps, but he was active and would have been available had the team needed him if there were other injuries that occurred. So again, just goes to show the toughness of Luke Musgrave, which LaFleur has raved about multiple times in the past. Again, he suffered an injury within the first few plays of the Vikings game in Week 4, played throughout that game, and then was available the following week for an ankle injury that ended up needing surgery because there were damage to the ligaments in his left ankle. So just shows the absolute toughness of Luke Musgrave. And by being designated to return, it opens up a 21-day window where the Packers now have this 3-week time frame to add him back to the 53-man roster. Now, he can be added back on day 1. He can be added back on day 21. It can be anywhere in that time frame. And once he's activated off of injured reserve, he's then going to be available on Sundays. But really, it's just all going to be dependent upon his health, how quickly he was recovering. And as Matt LaFleur said, and as you can imagine, he's been out since Week 4, there's going to be a ramping up process that takes place, right? He was a limited participant on Wednesday, went through the warm-ups with the team, but then did the individual drills off to the side. So I would be very surprised if he's out there this week. I feel like the earliest that we could see him is the New Orleans Saints game the following Monday. But again, we'll see. It's obviously a very, very very, very much a positive that he's back in the fold for the Green Bay Packers, because Luke Musgrave's presence can provide a new element, a different element for this Packers offense down the stretch and into the postseason. Now, he got off to a slow start this year in the passing game. Through the 4 games that he was available, 5 receptions on 7 targets for only 22 yards in that game. But again, there's a different element that he brings to the tight end position and the offense as a whole. Tucker Kraft has big playability, right? We've seen it. His big playability is a lot of yards after the catch. You get him the ball in space, short area, maybe some intermediate throws, and you let him go. Luke Musgrave's big playability is with his speed and ability to stretch the field. That creates matchup problems. I mean, Luke Musgrave's 6'6", 250, runs a 4.6 40. That's an incredibly difficult matchup for a cornerback, for a linebacker, for a safety, really for anyone, right? And so that combination of his size and speed makes him a matchup problem, allows him to be someone who can stretch the field, and that's going to garner attention, right? The defense has to know where Luke Musgrave is going to be on the field, and even if the ball isn't coming his way, because of that gravity, because of that attention he draws, that can help create opportunities for other players within the offense, underneath routes, over the middle, different by helping to spread the defense out. And again, maybe draw some attention to where there's one-on-one opportunities elsewhere, more space to operate within. So getting Musgrave back, again, adds a new dimension to this offense. And then you couple that by pairing him with Tucker Kraft. And again, Jordan Love said this on Wednesday. There's a different part of the playbook that the Packers will be able to unlock when they have Luke Musgrave and they have Tucker Kraft on the field together. Again, they both impact the game in different ways, but the Packers, we all know Tucker Kraft can be a blocker and a pass catcher. The Packers feel very highly about Luke Musgrave's ability to do that as well, to hold his own as a blocker. And when you have a tight end position who can impact the game as a blocker, who can impact the game through the air, you have a layer of unpredictability that's now baked into your offense, right? If you have a tight end who primarily just run blocks, or you have a tight end who primarily just impacts the passing game, lining up in the slot a lot, the defense, when they're on the field, has probably a good idea about, all right, here's how they're lined up in the formation, here's kind of, a general idea of what we could expect from the tight end position. But if you have a tight end who can impact the game as a blocker, who can impact the game as a pass catcher, there's a little bit more unpredictability that comes with that, right? The defenses can't necessarily decipher pre-snap just based on who's in the game, where the tight end's lined up. Is this a run? Is this a pass? Because they can effectively impact both of those games and do so from a variety of positions. They can do so inline, they can do so from the slot, maybe even from the backfield. So again, there's just a lot more versatility that comes with having tight ends of that caliber. And the Packers don't just have one, they have 2. And this is a Matt LaFleur offense that uses a lot of 2 tight end sets. And when Matt LaFleur first got to Green Bay, we heard him often mention the illusion of complexity, right? And in short, what that means is you're keeping the defense guessing, you're keeping them off balance because you're running a variety of plays from just a few personnel packages. And again, an important element to accomplishing that is that versatility that we mentioned, having tight ends who can impact the game in a variety of ways. Another way that you unlock that illusion of complexity is by running like plays that look similar but end up quite different. So in the first quarter, the Packers might run a running play from a specific formation. Then in the third quarter, they might line up in that same formation. The play may even start out the same way. The defense thinks the run's coming because they saw it earlier, and then all of a sudden it's a passing play. And really, really important to unlocking what we just described, that those like plays, running the variety of plays from just a few personnel packages, is the tight end position. Because again, they offer so much versatility where you can line them up, their impact on the run game, their impact on the passing game. So that impact becomes magnified, becomes twofold when you have Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, especially again, because how they impact the passing game are 2 different ways. Catch in space, yak ability, and then someone who can stretch the field, someone who can catch those seam routes, someone who can run those deep crossing routes, which can help open up opportunities for others. So there's a lot of this Matt LaFleur playbook that we still haven't seen yet this season that can be unlocked when Luke Musgrave fully returns and when him and Tucker Kraft are able to get on the field together. And this conversation that we're having right now about the impact that these two can have together, I mean, I've written about it a lot. I know I've talked about it a lot, but we haven't seen it a lot. Injuries have hampered the ability to have these two on the field together. We look at the start of last season, their rookie year. Luke Musgrave was the go-to tight end option out of the gate, and it wasn't until he had the kidney injury, I think it was in week 11 last year, and had to go on injured reserve at that time, where we saw Tucker Kraft put into a larger role, where we saw Tucker Kraft really emerge, and then it wasn't until week 18 that Luke Musgrave returned. Then this season, Musgrave was available the first 4 games, but has been out since. We haven't seen a ton of snaps where these two players have been at the height of their powers, right? Where Musgrave's been fully healthy, where Tucker Kraft has emerged and been the Tucker Kraft that we've all grown accustomed to. So there's still a lot that can be unlocked within this offense, and getting Musgrave back is going to be a big part in helping the Packers accomplish that. And as we look at, like on the last video, we talked about finding that consistency, being at your best for the home stretch for the hopeful playoff run. Musgrave's going to be a part of that. Again, different element, different dimensions that he brings to this offense. Now it's about ramping up and getting back to being available on Sundays. All right, before we wrap up here, 2 other quick injury notes. Romeo Doubs, as of Wednesday, still in concussion protocol, but seems to be trending in the right direction. He was a full participant in Wednesday's practice for the first time since entering concussion protocol. Again, every player is going to go through those protocols at a different pace, but being a full participant on Wednesday, Doubs does seem to be trending in the right direction. And then Edgerrin Cooper was a limited participant on Wednesday. This was the first practice that he's returned to since, I believe it was before the 49ers game when he suffered a hamstring injury in practice. And this is obviously all these injuries, everyone we talked about today, is important to this Packers, their success as a team. But going into the Seattle game, Cooper's availability is going to be a big one that I'm going to be watching on Thursday and Friday. This Packers linebacker group, they played really well against the run the last few games, but they've been picked apart in the passing games. Isaiah McDuffie has particularly been targeted by the Dolphins and the Lions. I think he's been targeted around 20 times just in the last 2 games alone. Both offenses, Miami and Detroit, have found a lot of success over the middle of the field against this Packers defense. And again, Tua, Jared Goff, those are two of the best quarterbacks at taking advantage of the middle of the field, right? So it was a difficult matchup to start with, but getting Edgerrin Cooper back, having his speed, athleticism, his coverage ability is going to be really important in this game, because Geno Smith is another quarterback who targets the middle of the field, and the Seattle running backs are heavily involved in the passing game. And a lot of times limiting the running backs in the passing game can fall on the linebacker's shoulder. So having Cooper back in the mix, one, just his coverage ability, his ability to cover ground. And similarly, at the beginning, we mentioned about Jaire's impact on the rest of the defense. To an extent, Cooper has that ability as well, again, because of how much ground he can cover. That gives Jeff Hafley more flexibility in how he utilizes the safety position, the cornerbacks, what he asks of them, because he knows there's a bit of an additional buffer when you have Cooper out there, again, because of all the ground that he can cover. So Cooper's status for Sunday's game, again, specifically against the Seahawks offense, running backs heavily involved in the passing game. Geno Smith over the middle, I think his availability is going to be really important in helping that linebacker position for Green Bay get some added stability in coverage, again, where they've struggled as of late. So I appreciate you guys tuning in as always. If you've made it this far, might as well hit like, might as well hit subscribe on the channel. I greatly appreciate it. You can find all my work over at ESPNlacrosse.com. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Until next time, friends, take care.